Shalom Aleichem. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day. Very excited to learn some Torah with you today. Here in the Sefer Achinuch, we're going to look at Mitzvah 111. Mitzvah 111. Feel free, as always, to weigh in with your comments, your questions, your thoughts, so we can continue this learning together. And we're going to start with 111, but the real issue we're going to look at is this issue of drinking on Purim, which starts tonight. So Mitzvah 111, Shelo le'achol v'lishtot tikrovet avodah zara. This is about the ban on eating or drinking anything that comes from the offering to an idol. And we look here at the verse in Exodus chapter 34, verses 12 and 15. What the Chinuch brings here is, Hishamer lecha pen tichrot brit liyoshev haaretz v'chulei, v'zavchu laloheihem v'kar lecha v'achalta mezivcho. So here in Shemot, chapter 34, take heed to yourself, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they sacrifice to their gods, and they call you, and you will eat of their zevach, of their sacrifice. So here we see a prohibition of eating the food and drink of Ovdei Avodah Zarah. The notion of yayin nesech, of drinking the wine, for example, of idolaters is an Isser B'Hana'ah, right? It's prohibited even on a Torah level, even benefiting from it, not just of drinking for it. And then D'Rabbanan, on a rabbinic level, we see something called Stam Yayin, which is about just drinking the wine, any wine that is not kosher, any wine that was handled by Gentiles, which is a difficult issue to understand. And there's a machloket here, an argument about whether this is also asur b'hana'ah, just forbidden to drink from or also to benefit from. Now, it is a big challenge in modernity to understand what would be the problem of drinking wine that was not kosher, because it's not an issue of ingredients as much as this concern of idolatrous practices, or according to some chatznut, we'll socialize and our values will be influenced. We'll come to throw away our Judaism and just come to marry others who don't value our Jewish values. Now, it's worth noting that there are some minority positions out there that are lenient on Stam Yayin. A number to look at. Rabbi Chaim Ovadia has written about this more extensively, and there was a tshuva of the Ramah. There was a position of the Ramah which a lot of later editions removed, which was also lenient on drinking this kind of wine. Okay, but the main position here exists that we don't want to eat or drink of this type of food, lest we come to intermingle with those who want to destroy our values or pull us down away from a place of moral and spiritual refinement. So, but the other level here, and this is where we're going to extend this into Purim, is this issue of drunkenness and this issue of consumption in a way that is about indulgence, about excess, essentially in avodah zarah, in idolatry of self, that one worships oneself in a form of hedonism. All I seek is pleasure, eat, drink, and be merry. And so whatever feels good, even if it's extreme, is something to pursue. Now, this is complicated when it comes to Purim, because we learn here from the Megillah, it says, La'asot otam yemei mishteh v'simcha u'mishloach manot ish l'reyehu u'matanot l'evyonim. Here in Esther, this 9th chapter, we see that we should make days of feasting and gladness, and days for sending gifts of food to one another and presents to the poor. Of course, the big emphasis here on the mitzvah of reading the Megillah, and reading it critically and intellectually, and especially the moral challenges. But then matanot le'evyonim and shalach manot, right? That we should send food gifts and we should take care of the hungry. But then we see yamei mishteh v'simcha, right? That these should be days of feasting and gladness. And the question is, what does that mean? And the position emerges in the Talmud, in Megillah, the famous passage in the Talmud Megillah 7b, the Babylonian Talmud, that we should drink ad de lo yada, Adelo yada. We should drink to the point where we no longer know the difference. Bein Arar Haman leBaruch Mordechai. Between cursed is Haman, one who wants to kill the innocent, and blessed is Mordechai, who takes a stand of moral and spiritual conviction to stand up for Am Yisrael and the vulnerable in general. And there are lots of sources that follow this. Now, to be sure, it goes on in the Megillah here, right after saying we should do this. Absurdly, it says Rava and Rabbi Zera, they had a Purim banquet together, and they got drunk. So what happens? Rava got up and he killed Rabbi Zera, right? Almost like making a joke of this idea of drunkenness, that it can lead to terrible things, including murder. So right after it says, drink adelo yada, drink to the point where you're so confused that you don't know good from evil, then it says, but someone did this and he killed someone else, right? Even a rabbi at such a high level, and he kills someone else. So there's lots of sources on this idea of adelo yada that basically say that we should drink, even to the point of drunkenness on the holiday of Purim. But this is a very high level, those rabbis were dealing with, of nichnas yayin yotzei sod, that in goes wine and out comes secrets, Kabbalistic secrets, secret understandings of God. And this is not the level that we're talking about today. And so while there are many sources that suggest drinking, even excessive drinking on Purim, and there's sadly many cultures today that embrace such an approach, we see many sources that reject this. Not only softly reject it, but strongly reject this idea. If you look at Rabbeinu Ephraim, the 12th century from Regensburg, he's a great Tosafist, one of the first students of Rabbeinu Tam. He's brought down by the Aruch HaShulchan of the late 19th century, early 20th century, Rav Yechiel Michal Epstein, who basically says this is, the Aruch HaShulchan basically says this is not a normative statement, and Rabbeinu Ephraim rules that one is not, indeed not obligated to drink on Purim. Certainly it would be prohibited for an alcoholic to drink. Certainly it would be prohibited for children to drink. But the truth is, he says, there's not an obligation for anyone at all. We see that the Pri Chadash brings this source. The Pri Chadash of 17th century Italy says over here, however, now that the generations have regressed, right, Hadorot Mekukalim, right, Yeridat Hadorot, that we used to have a deeper, wiser understanding, we were more connected to Maseh Bereshit and Har Sinai, and today we're not on that level. So he says it's proper to hold by the reasoning of Rabbeinu Ephraim and not to drink more than just a little bit more than one is accustomed to drinking on Yom Tov. That on holidays, one has a little bit of Simchat Yom Tov, a little bit of extra enjoyment with food and drink. And one can fulfill the mitzvah on Purim, adelo yada, with just drinking slightly more than one would drink on Yom Tov. Because one's intention is ultimately for God, so that no one will, God forbid, falter in any way. So we see the Pri Chadash brings the Rabbeinu Ephraim, that we're not on the level anymore to be thinking about drinking like this as a form of religious celebration. We see from the Baal HaMaor from 12th century Provence, he also brings the Rabbeinu Ephraim, worth seeing inside, and the Meiri of 13th century Provence is actually brought by the Chafetz Chaim of 20th century Poland and Israel, that one is obliged to increase in joy and eating and drinking on this day. However, the Meiri says, we're not commanded to belittle ourselves through this joy. We were not commanded to a joy of insanity, Meiri says, rather to a joy of pleasure that will lead us to love and praise and thank God for the miracles that have been done for us. Right? That wine that might make us, excessive drinking that might make us stupid, or what the Meiri calls insanity, or even act in dangerous, inappropriate ways, is certainly not what we're looking at. And the Chafetz Chaim strongly endorses the Meiri here. Rav Avadia Yosef of 20th century Israel says over there that a person is obligated based on this idea of Andalo Yada, he says, this means to say things in riddles and to rejoice in the joy of the mitzvah of Purim, of what we're trying to achieve here, and not to become crazed in drunkenness or be drawn after frivolity or lightheadedness or improper speech, chok, v'kalot rosh, v'nivel peh, and improper speech, because this is not joy but frivolity and foolishness. Sadly, this has become very pervasive, what Rav Aaron Lichtenstein of blessed memory called frum hedonism, right? That the more hedonistic I am, the more basar I have, the more meat I have on my table, the more I drink, in a certain sense, the more I spend lavishly and go overboard, almost like I'm a little frummer. It's a little bit more religious. But in fact, religion, the Torah is seeking moral refinement, not frivolity, not recklessness. And when done in sort of an alpha male culture of just men getting together and speaking loosely and acting wildly in such a way, this is not a Kiddush Hashem. So the Beit Yosef, Rav Yosef Karo of 16th century Sfat, brings down the, first he brings the Ran, where the Ran says it's not appropriate to behave in such a manner. But then he brings the Orchot Chaim, and the Orchot Chaim says one must get intoxicated on Purim. He brings this idea. But this does not mean that they should get drunk, for drunkenness is completely prohibited from the Torah. And there's no greater sin than that, he says. For it causes promiscuity and bloodshed and other transgressions, but rather one should drink a little more than what they're used to, right? So an adult who is of age, the Beit Yosef brings the Orchot Chaim to say that that it would not only not be advisable or not be obligatory to get drunk, but actually it's a great sin to do such a thing, lest it lead toward these other moral ills. The Ramah goes even further. If you look at the Shulchan Aruch 695 too, the Ramah says over there that we can be yotzei through sleep, that one can fulfill ad lo yada by taking a nap. So rather, when everyone else is about to take shots, one can just take a nap and fulfill this special mitzvah. The Baal Sefer HaKolbo in 13th to 14th century Provence says on this idea that a person must drink on Purim. He says, but they must not get drunk. They must not get drunk, because drunkenness, says the Baal Sefer HaKolbo, is totally asur, totally forbidden, and there's no bigger crime in Judaism, because it leads to sexual sins and bloodshed as well as other crimes. But one should drink a little more than they usually do, so that one should be full of joy and able to pass one's joy on to the poor and unfortunate and comfort them. And that is truly great happiness, he says. This is beautiful, that simcha is not about hedonism. The joy of the holiday is not merely about getting drunk, God forbid, but rather about lifting up others. Lifting up others. Now, it's true, the Torah is not ascetic. Judaism is not an ascetic tradition. And there are ascetic sources. But in general, we embrace pleasure. We enjoy materials. We embrace food and drink within certain limits. But we should know ourselves and understand these limits and understand what might lead us towards dangerous or immoral behaviors that might lead us to mistreat women and children and other men, and or engage in very dangerous behaviors. Obviously, if anyone has any drink, they shouldn't drive. That's obvious. Obviously, children should not be given. Anyone underage should not be drinking. And we should be role models. What does it mean? We want to be role models for our children on the holiday. We should go around taking keg stands and drinking shots of alcohol and falling over? Or should we show them what the joy of a holiday is through chesed, through matanot levyonim and shalach manot, and intellectually analyzing the complexities of the Megillah? So my last thought here is that we learn that the Torah was given through coercion. That the Torah was given through coercion at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, and that Purim is a time of kimu v'kiblu, that actually what we do on Purim is we renew our commitment to our moral values. We renew our commitment to Kadosh Baruch Hu, to God, and we do that with consciousness and intentionality, not with drunkenness. Kimu v'kiblu, we come to accept the Torah again with our full will, in a way that is about honoring God, honoring the Torah, honoring kavod habriot, honoring other people, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, showing love to other people, and being people of dignity. So we see here in Mitzvah 111 that there is a ban on eating or drinking anything from an offering to an idol. And we talked about yayin nesech and stam yayin, about how we think about wine today. And we extend this idea of being careful with drink in general, lest it lead us to hedonism and a loss of our values. We extend this to the holiday of Purim as well, starting tonight, and with the Su'udah, the special celebration tomorrow, that indeed this should be, as we learn in the Megillah, La Soto Tam Yimei Mishke V'Simcha Umishloach Manot Ish L'Reyehu Umatanot L'Evyonim. This should be a day of chesed, a day of love and kindness and celebration, but a day of moral intentionality, of kimu v'kiblu, where we recommit ourselves, where we act as role models to our children and build a holy covenantal community that is built upon respect and spiritual consciousness and intellectual rigor. And thus, today we can say, as we saw over in the Pri Chadash, that we may have declined from a level where alcohol could be a primary vehicle towards accessing spiritual revelation and spiritual insight, to now today where we have to not only say that we're going to limit, but we're going to or that it's mutar, that it's permitted to get drunk, but actually that it's asur, that it's prohibited to get drunk, as we saw over there. And that we should encourage our communities to take a stand, that we not allow these our shuls, God forbid, to be places of drunkenness, and that we regulate such behavior to ensure that we are truly an Am Kadosh, a holy nation that celebrates the holiday of Purim in health and in safety and in dignity. Chag Sameach, wishing everyone a beautiful Purim, a day of chesed and insight and love and community. All the best. Purim Sameach.